You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome back to The Wild Side, the official Mondo Macabro podcast. My name is Ryan Verrill. You may know me from the Disconnected or Someone's Favorite Productions. With me, as always, Mr. Chris Haskell. Thanks for being here, Chris.
Hello, Ryan. How are you?
Doing well. For those that don't know Chris's other stuff, he is from They Live by Film and Punk Vacation, the unofficial Vinegar Syndrome podcast. We are excited to be here on the last Mondo Macabro, episode of our podcast for the year. This is a big deal, so we can recap a little bit and talk about what's coming. We got 2 titles to dive deep into today. How do you feel about the year there, Chris?
I feel good, Ryan. You know, have you ever seen those videos going around of people that have set up basically like content farms mostly in China, as the videos I've seen, where it's just rows and rows of people on camera giving podcasts and like that's how I imagine that's how you must feel. Especially there's days where I feel like that. I can only imagine how you feel. But I'm being released from my my work for the year, so I don't have another podcast recording on the book until like early January. So I'm gonna take a couple of weeks and just decompress and just watch movies for fun.
And rest your voice, of course.
Rest this voice, drink some honey, get ready for another year.
Fair warning to everybody now, since we are in the throes of the holiday season, we both have families literally calling us as we record this. So this is likely going to be a fairly short episode, but we still want to give you all the goods. So we're gonna recap some of the titles that came out this year, and then dive deep into the 2 that we brought up last month, which is Alucarda, one of the oldest Mondo Macabro physical media releases, and then of course Satanico Pandemonium, which has since gotten a Blu-ray upgrade, and we'll go into some of the details of those later. But first, from this year, Chris, you want to share the titles that were released?
Yeah. So I think I hope we got this right. So first, because they shipped some of the 2023 titles all the way through kind of the early part of the year. But I think the official releases for this year starts with Special Silencers, Dr. Jekyll and the Werewolf, then Death Squad, Fata Morgana, Sex Apocalypse, the Warrior Collection, which is 3 Warrior movies, the Max Picas Collection, and the Hungry Snake Woman, The Killer Is Not Alone, and Tokugawa Sex Ban. And then some of the new titles that were announced, like Cafe Flesh, are going to be Girl Slaves and Morgana Le Fay. Those are going to be released, get to us in early 2025. But or is the Warrior only 2 movies? Maybe the Warrior is only 2. But that's my. I don't have the disc in front of me. I can't. I'm just trying to.
I believe it's a trilogy.
It's 3. I'm almost positive it's 3. I'm just trying to picture the disc in my head. But that's my personal favorite release this year. I just, I'm a little bit of a homer for Indonesian cinema, anyways. Between that and Hungry Snake Woman, like just being able to see those, and one of my like surprising moments of the year was when Jared was mentioning how they actually didn't do anything to the transfer. That was like the original TV, footage that they had, which is crazy to me because it looks so good. But beautiful looking movie. Same with Hungry Snake Woman. It just looks beautiful on disc. Super fascinating stories. Indonesian folklore is it's just built for horror in such a crazy way. Like the stories are so already they're just horror adjacent to begin with. And so they play so well on screen, and the Warrior is just fun. Who doesn't love a Riki-O kind of, Riki-O light kind of story? So I loved it.
It's a great choice. If I'm going with any, I got to go with Tokugawa Sex Ban. This was a year that has brought a lot of titles that people have been asking for a long time, and this is one of them. A lot of the other larger labels had some surprises, but this is one that big genre fans were extremely excited to have released. And once again, Mondo Macabro delivering very high quality release, looks great, sounds great, good special features, hell of a disc. Glad we got it.
There was Sam Deegan had asked me to do 8 Taro Ishii films, And obviously, Tokugawa Sex Band is not a Teruo Ishii film, but it's in that same genre of like bad things that happen to people in Japan in the Tokugawa shogunate. And so it was fun to watch that movie as I was doing research for this other episode. And by the way, I guess I should plug it. If you don't listen to Sam's podcast, Arrows Plus Massacre, you should, even if you don't want to listen to my voice again. She has a lot of really great guests on there. But that episode was a ton of fun, and seeing those two kind of so close together was fun because they just kind of built that lore up even more. Yeah, that's a great choice.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you were able to be on those episodes with her. Her podcast has been an excellent addition to everybody's players over 2024. Yet another exciting thing that we got access to this year.
That's right.
Jared had mentioned that he might be able to come on before the end of the year, but he was not able to make it. Unfortunately, we will get him back early in 2025, and we are talking to get Pete Toombs on an episode soon. I know he does not do a lot of things like this, so it's going to be a very fun conversation. Hopefully you've enjoyed some of the stuff that we've done so far, including bringing on Tim Paxton for our Bollywood episode, and we'll be doing more stuff like that moving forward. We got some special people for some of these releases that I think you will be very happy to hear from, considering they are the experts on some of these films for sure.
Absolutely.
Last month, we had brought up that we were going to be covering 2 films in our next episode, and we decided on a couple of wonderful Mexican films that are... let's see. What is the best way to say this?
Well, so the initial joke was that these were the closest thing that Mondo Macabro has to Christmas films.
That's right.
Because they were kind of, about the church and Christmas, not even Christmas adjacent. Let's be very clear. They simply had the Christian stuff in them. And so that was the closest we were going to get.
These movies are both about spreading a lot of love. You can say that for sure. There's also a whole lot of blood. So the color red runs through both of these.
And they both are verdant they're both very, like, they take place in a lot of beautiful outdoor scenery and very green. So red and green, there you go. Bloody verdant movies, just like Christmas.
So I will go through the honor of introducing our first title, which is Alucarda. Okay. This is a title that came out from Mondo Macabro literally more than 2 decades ago. This is a very old DVD. This film is from 1975. It is a joint USA-Mexican production, directed by Juan Lopez Moctezuma. Something like that. Yeah. This movie is intense, to say the least. This is a really unique entry into like this nunsploitation genre that a lot of people have tried to mine a little bit over the last couple of years with releases from places like Seven Films and a couple from VS and some others. But this movie, the DVD release, first off, should mention, is a unique one from Mondo Macabro as well, because it has 2 DVD releases, one from the UK, one from the US. And what's interesting is they're actually different. The US one is listed as a special edition and has quite a few more bonus features on it. Both of these have a digital transfer from the negative, documentary on the film's director, and then we have a documentary on Mexican horror movies. And the US release also includes an interview with Guillermo del Toro, which, funny enough, it says interview with Hellboy director Guillermo del Toro, because that was the main hot thing when this was coming out.
Of all the things that he's known for now.
Yes, don't need to say anything about Mexico or horror. Hellboy director Guillermo del Toro. We've got a text interview with the film's director. We've got a Mondo Macabro preview like we always get. And there is just so much that I want to say about this film. This is about a friendship between 2 young girls named Justine and Alucarda. And their relationship is destroying the lives around them in a torrent of blood, death, and damnation, according to the back of the DVD release. But this movie, is superlative in so many different sentences. Right. There's so many different ways you can describe this, because it is a beautifully scenic film. It is bloody beyond belief. There is some genuine really classic imagery that you will see referenced in many other pieces. I've seen people compare this to like if Ken Russell's The Devils met something like, I don't know, Andy Milligan in a back alley, and somehow that was beat up with somebody else that was almost like El Topo type of fantasy land in this, because it's such a unique input into all these genres. What is a big takeaway, though, is this is a English language film set in Mexico with very little dialogue. And even though I say very little dialogue, there's a lot of, we'll say, vocals throughout this film, because the most memorable part of this film for some people is that this film starts screaming a few minutes through and pretty much doesn't stop till the end.
What's that movie with well, shoot, what's the guy's name? The guy from the main guy from the American TV show of The Office, The Quiet Place?
Oh, yes.
Is it The Quiet Place?
Yes.
Okay. They would both be dead immediately.
Immediately.
If they're in The Quiet Place. No, but actually, I did want to mention, it's interesting that you brought up El Topo, because Juan Lopez Moctezuma was tied in pretty closely with Jodorowsky.
Yep.
And produced Fando y Liz and El Topo. So they were, he gave some money to Jodorowsky, but also helped as a producer. And the interesting thing was, Jodorowsky was, he surrounded himself with artists. And so I think the fact that they were connected shows in this film. I do think the comparisons to Ken Russell are correct. Like the comparisons to Jodorowsky are correct. Like there are moments in this film that have very surrealistic, striking images that are quite beautiful. And it's interesting to have that happen at the same time as this, like these tortured souls that are getting kind of, taken over by the devil and put into like a convent. And I don't know, it's an interesting way that he tells this story. It's very much a piece of art as much as it is a movie, I think. And so in that way, I do think it fits in with those masters very well.
Fully. Yeah, completely agree with that. I watched this movie with my wife for the first time in 2023.
Okay.
Not the first time I had seen it, but it was the first time she saw it. And the yelling is something that she had stick with her. But other than that, I really want to point out how actually religious this movie is. Like they actually have so much more than just the go-to like exorcism scenes.
Right.
There are actual references to like the way that people handle themselves, rites that people acted out all the time, certain temples built the way that you see referred in many other pieces of doctrine. This movie is like an intensely great piece of art for this whole Mexican wave of like Catholic horror in a way. And I am so happy that Mono Macabro got their hands on it.
Oh yeah. I think the devil, and so the basic kind of setup, right, is that Alucarda, her mom dies, and so she's taken in by this convent and kind of raised in this convent. But there's a important moment when the mom dies where the devil comes in and basically is going to like protect her, right? And so this sort of weird tie happens early on that as she gets older, I don't think as she's a child, like they don't really see signs of that or anything. But then there's a moment as a teenager where there's another young woman who comes in named Justine, like you said, who comes into the convent, and they board together, and they instantly kind of form this really tight bond. Eventually, quite quickly fall in love and make a life pact together, essentially.
Like a blood pact, yeah.
Blood pact. You don't see a lot of blood pacts with blood from the breast. I don't know if that's like a thing. But anyways, the devil is portrayed as this sort of like, am I going crazy? He's like a fawn, right? Like he's like the body of a man and the legs of a horse, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Maybe he doesn't have 4 legs, but at least has like a hairy leg, like at least like I'm thinking almost of the guy from Narnia. Uh, Tumnus or Tumnus. What?
Played by James McAvoy.
Yeah, Tumnus. That's right. I'm almost, maybe it's like that. I can't remember. Anyways, I should remember. I just rewatched this 2 days ago, um, but he's kind of like guiding them this whole way, right, and leading them and down this path, and it just spirals so fast.
It does, and again, a lot of this, the spiraling so fast and like the building a fast bond. What's crazy is the pacing in this movie. This movie does not let up at all because it's legitimately only 74 minutes long.
Yeah.
And they have so much crammed in that amount of time that it feels like it goes by at such a brisk pace that it's hard to keep up with a little bit. But I mean, the visuals there are astonishing. So you're brought in every scene. I mean, even like some of the individuals from like the elders of the temple that they're in are wearing these unique things that essentially it's like gauze. And it's not like normal robes, it's gauze, but they're matted with blood.
Right.
And so they're all this striking visuals that are just beautiful to look at. Very bloody movie. This is one of the more like, I don't even know the right way to say this, like well-worn pieces of Mexican film history, because this one is so well known, and yet so few have yet to see it, that I know that we don't have a Blu-ray yet. I'm hoping someday either Mondo or someone else is able to rescue the elements, but this movie deserves to be archived in every single way. Love this film.
Yeah, I do think it's good to talk about the blood a little bit, because the interesting thing is you assume when you first start the movie, you assume the way that it kind of goes into the plot, you assume that Alucarda is going to sort of take over this role as like the devil, or she's going to be the ringleader, and for sure, like to some extent she is. But I think as I watched this again, I was noticing that the arc of this film kind of lies even more in Justine, even though it's called Alucarda, because I think I was seeing it in a way where Alucarda sort of takes over, she plays that like steady kind of force she's given herself to the devil already, like that's done. So she's just kind of doing his bidding now. But Justine actually has like a bit of an arc as the story goes on. And then I guess I don't know if we spoil, but as the story ends, she ends up having the biggest transformation out of the lot, right?
Yep.
Because they do try, like the church tries to contain them. Like they try the what's it called, exorcism route, and they try like these different things as they notice these, because there's a really important scene right before the exorcism where they basically call out the name of Satan, and they are both in the room running around like they're out of their minds, invoking the name of Satan, and everybody freaks out, and then they put him through this exorcism, and they basically just come back stronger. In a really interesting way. So
one thing that the blood is a big part of that I really wanted to bring up here is I mentioned how the actual like religious power structures come into play in this film, because a lot of times when you're seeing a nunsploitation film, it literally is leaning on that exploitation part and less on the nun part. And I feel like this is one of the best balanced versions of this type of story, because we get actual references to like self-flagellation and like you mentioned, the church sort of pulling them back to the exorcism and focusing on the sexual repression and everything else that is going on through these scenes that we can make out through all the screaming, essentially. But most of the time, these movies really only give us the sexiness, or they only give us the blood, and it's how many pairs of breasts can we get on screen at the same time as somebody's spitting up blood in the background? But this is actually like, no, there's like satanic reasons that we're going into every single one of these scenes. And I really think this, mixed with Satanico Pandemonium that we're about to talk about, are two of the better entries into that. And this is probably one of, I mean, especially the fact that they do this on scene. The way that they film this is so perfect for the subject matter.
Yeah, and I would even argue or propose to you, I want to see what you think about this, that this is not purely an exploitation film in the context of how the genre is typically portrayed.
Right.
It's like a combination of a folk horror film and an exploitation movie. I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, because I think Satanico Pandemonium, not to jump ahead too much, but that plays a little bit more like an exploitation movie.
Yeah.
And this one leans a little bit more into like the folk horror genre. I just looked up pictures. It's not that he has hairy legs or a goat or anything like that. He's just a hirsute individual. The devil. So he just has a hair, like he just kind of has hair everywhere. But in my mind, it was anyways. But so it's not. But he's the one thing I do kind of want to call out, and the reason I was kind of going here in the beginning and I got distracted. But this is in that folk horror genre. And both of these movies also have very much of a fairy tale quality to the way they begin. And I think that's an interesting choice. Like they're very, like, I feel like both directors, but here we're talking about Moctezuma, but I feel like they both really understand how to set this up in a way of almost making you feel safe, and it's like serene and sweet, and you have no idea of how messed up this is going to get in like 40 minutes, 30 minutes.
Yeah, and that leads to all of the screaming that we hear throughout this entire film. And again, like there's some very intimate scenes in this, of course, but just some intimate imagery too that to talk about. I mean, even our two main characters, we see literally like married by this goat-headed figure, and all of these scenes are pieced together with actual religious imagery that, I don't know, this movie hits hard if you've never seen this for that first time, especially if you grew up close to any sort of like religious symbolism or studying any aspect of either Catholicism or just even really any Abrahamic religion.
Since the world is just a bunch of heathens now, it's probably worth mentioning some basic tenets that may not be obvious to people watching this now. But in Christianity, the goat has been linked to Satan, and a lot of that comes from when Christians kind of got started. The pagan worship at the time worshipped a goat god, and so that was like that was viewed as like the opposite of kind of where they were going. So that's rooted in the culture, I think, as much as anything. But that symbolism has kind of stayed on beyond the teachings of Catholicism and Christianity and those things. So the fact that he's a fawn creature, goat, and then, like you said, there's a actual goat that comes in at some point. And I think it's the same character, right? I think it's just different visualizations of the same Satan character.
Yep.
But that's very rooted in the teachings of the church. And then the idea of a marriage officiated by the devil is also a very powerful image in Catholicism that's offensive on like 7 different levels in that scene. You could probably argue even 2 women to Catholics in the 70s would be offensive, but the fact that they have blood on them, the fact that they've mixed the blood of not only each other, but also the blood of this Satan fit character. Like there's a lot of things going on in that scene that would all be seen as quite controversial when they were released. I'm trying to think if there's any other like core like Catholic or Christian tenets that would need to be called out. I will say that the one other thing that I like about this movie a lot, and I think I'm trying to remember now. I hope I'm not getting these confused. No, this one more than the Satanico. The nuns are pure in this one, right? They're not evil. Like they're not trying to get anything out of. They're relatively sincere nuns, as far as I remember.
Yeah, they're not like sexy nuns trying to get one over on the young virgin that just came into the temple or anything like that.
Right.
On that note, I think it's probably a good time to transfer over to Satanico Pandemonium, which is a much more basic nunsploitation film. But I mean, this one, I don't know, it leans very heavily on some other references that we haven't brought up yet. Like, obviously, the devils is something that you can see, comparing to this easily, but one that, we don't really bring up enough with talking about nunsploitation films, especially ones that are as, I don't know, as blatant or as explicit as this one. But we got to go all the way back to Black Narcissus for many of these. I mean, the references to that film are off the charts. I mean, you can see it in very specific shots. You can see it in the way people dress. There are lots of ways that laid the foundation for something like Satanico Pandemonium to be made. What's interesting is this came out the exact same year, also in Mexico. Mondo Macabro had released this on DVD and then eventually released this on Blu-ray. I believe the Blu-ray was 2019, I think, something like that. This one is directed by Gilberto Martinez Solares, and it is only 89 minutes. So this is a hell of a double feature to take in less than 3 hours if you really want to. You want to tell us about this one?
Yeah, no, this one is really interesting because there's a couple of different things that I think are worth mentioning. One is that Alucarda, it kind of makes sense coming from a director like Moctezuma, who is tied in with a lot of those surrealist movements and kind of outsider art movements. That probably wasn't as big of a surprise for him. He had a more limited filmography. He's only credited for directing 6 pictures or something like that, and most of them are horror. Like, it makes sense in his au revoir or his catalog. This one is a huge outlier for Gilberto Solares, though.
Yeah.
Like, it was not the beginning of his career. He has 162 total movies that he's credited for as a director. So this is an extremely prolific studio director. He's done everything from romance films to action films, but they're all very publicly sort of commercial. Like, that's what he was known for. And right. There's another interesting thing that I learned from Kat Ellinger and Sam Deegan on the commentary, which I think is super interesting. The guy that played Satan in Satanico Pandemonium was famous for playing Christ in Mexico. And so you have this weird mix of like this commercial director. Think of like, I don't know, like what's a good example? Just like a boring standard, studio director, right? Just making all these kind of pictures that is sort of a nondescript name. And with a star who's actually played Christ coming out with this, which is like, this is a more interesting, nuanced attack on the church. And there's a lot of hypocrisy in this film that's all over the place. And there's a huge discussion, I think, around the repressed nature of people inside, like what's like a nunnery, or like inside of a home like this.
Right.
And it just feels like it really came out of left field for Solaris, and it was 2 years before Alucarda, so there was no blueprint for this. This was just a movie that came out, and it was a bit random. And I think at the time, I don't know if really the Mexico population knew what to do with this. It was not a hit. And Solaris continued to work. I mean, he was making movies to the year 2000, so he was fine. But yeah, this is just one of these gems that, like, I mean, we're about to get into it in just a second, but this is one of these gems that has no real logical reason for being made. And it's just so cool that it was. No, but I just think the thing that's the most interesting to me about Satanico Pandemonium, other than kind of what I just said, I guess, is, they expose this weird subculture of Catholicism that you could even make a link, like a dotted line link to this all the way to some of the stuff that's come out about like the depravity in the Catholic Church. There's this weird undertone of just repression. And I don't even know if the women in Satanico Pandemonium are necessarily lesbian. I mean, they're certainly portrayed that way, but I think you could read in a way that they're just horny and like repressed, and like they're impressed by the character that comes in. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I just think it's like it's a different movie. It's a more scathing movie, I think, in some ways than Alucarda, which is just a fun, like, not possession, but like satanic kind of gore fest. And this one to me feels like it's trying to make more of a point.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. I guess we technically have not gone through the plot of Satanico. You want to go in and share what actually is happening here? Because this one's a little more dreamy.
Good point. So the thing that I think is interesting at the beginning is that Sister Maria is portrayed as this extremely wholesome character. Like we see her in this almost like a with like very soft lighting, almost like a like when they put Vaseline on the edge of the frame, like this extremely soft lighting, beautiful color. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's like a what's a Technicolor. I don't know if it's quite there, but it's this beautiful color, very beautiful. She's outside, she's in nature, and she's met immediately by this guy who we assume. I mean, I don't know how you felt, but right away I kind of felt like this was probably Satan, who meets her in the garden and kind of tempts her, and she runs away. And so you see her as somebody who's like not interested in whatever he was offering. But then you also see her almost immediately in the first like 10 minutes, maybe, start with self-flagellation and some of her darker desires coming out. And you realize there's more to her than is shown at first. And the movie becomes, I think, what separates this in my mind from Alucarda is where Alucarda and Justine were like all in on Satan. They were like, hell yeah, this is the way to go. This movie, it's very much a struggle, I think, between the two. And I think you really see this kind of struggle go back and forth throughout the film with Sister Maria. And the nuns around her are, they just they have no idea what to do with her because she's falling, but it's obvious that she's trying not to.
Yeah, and that's where the cover on the Blu-ray actually I think is a really good one. The funnel cover, because of course it is reversible. It's got this hooded figure that is holding a funnel into a woman's mouth and then pouring something in, and it's really like I don't know. Like palpable imagery that is used for this movie, and so much so that the individual from Satanico is the one that inspired Selma Hayek's character in From Dusk Till Dawn.
So, well, that's her name, right? In Dusk Till Dawn is Satanico Pandemonium. Yeah.
But obviously the look and all that, there's so much from this that I don't know. It still feels like there's so many people that are still yet to discover this, because this movie's great.
Totally. No, I mean both of these movies are excellent. Like maybe we're not if that's not abundantly clear in the way we've been talking about them. These are both exploitation masterpieces. Like they're right up there for me, both of them. I love them. I think the personal struggle in Satanico is interesting, and the devil as he's portrayed in Christian and Catholic sort of theology is a trickster, right? And I think in Satanico, it's not so much of a silly trickster like it is in Alucarda, where he almost comes off as, I don't want to say comical, but he almost has that little bit of like kind of whimsy to him. He's like a goat-looking dude, and But this one is much more. He's just portrayed as like a human, but he's tempting, and there's the way the movie ends is like the ultimate trick. And I don't know, I guess we shouldn't get into spoilers, right?
Probably not.
Yeah, but it's a really good ending, and it's worth. The movie's interesting all the way through in and of itself because it has everything that somebody looking for exploitation wants. Like it has, I think this one's a little more sleazy than Alucarda, and like there's like a lesbian scene, and there's like it's more sensual as opposed to just like a possession thing. But there's also torture in this one. So it kind of has like everything that somebody who's really looking for these exploitation movies would want. But at the end, it has this twist as well. So it's entertaining throughout, and it has everything you'd want if you're seeking out really interesting, weird exploitation movies. But then it also has a really interesting ending that I actually rewatched 3 times because I was trying to figure out. There's like certain moments that are critical for the way the movie ends, and I like if you look away, like this is a movie that you don't have to pay attention every half second. Like it's okay, like it kind of flows easily. But then the ending, there's like a few critical moments where you really have to be watching to understand how she goes from I don't know. I mean, is it a spoiler to say she starts to even become a murderer? I mean, I think that's a pretty critical part of this, right? That's
Yeah.
not really a spoiler, right? To go as she descends into becoming a pedophile, into becoming a murderer, and like all these things, into then the way the movie ends. I was like, wait a minute, I missed something, so I had to go back and watch it a few times.
Well, even the Mondo Macabro, the cover for the DVD kind of displays that in a way, because it shows her ripping her robe open and the devil coming out of her, essentially. But what I mentioned earlier about these two is like a double header because of the runtime. I kind of wanted to express that in a different way, because there is this school of thought for programming film, obviously, that you have to think about with many of these. And these two are truly like a really great like 8 o'clock and then midnight movie type of viewing back to back, because the first is a little bit more of like this broad understanding of the church through this almost nunsploitation type of feeling that feels dark and sinister but doesn't quite go there. And then Satanico Pandemonium is like the sleazy older brother that comes in, focuses on the nunsploitation side, and delivers in spades some of that stuff that Alucarda was great for and did some excellent imagery with, but Satanico delivers on more of like a I'm going to watch this one with the lights off and feel kind of skeezy about it.
Speaking of, is this the only time? I was trying to rack my brain to think of another time where an older woman has like a sexual relationship or attempted sexual relationship with an underage boy. I mean, I'm sure someone's going to call out like 10 examples.
Right.
It's certainly not as common. If you think about a pedophilic relationship, it usually doesn't work that way in movies.
I would agree.
Yeah. Especially when the boy's not into it, because he's
Right.
like, he doesn't want it. So it's kind of like sexual assault as well. And then, anyways, I'm trying really hard not to get into spoilers. There's so many things I want to say, but like, I think you watch her get caught up in this moment of like the way the movie portrays it. I think get caught up in this moment of evil, right? And then immediately kind of recoil and realize what she's done. And it's like, it's this tension that I think makes it more than just an exploitation film. It's also the actor's name, her last name is Pizzette, Caroline Pizzette, or she's Cecilia Pizzette. And I think she does a fantastic job in this because she really has to show like an internal struggle. And I think she pulls it off. From my side, she pulls it off.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as far as pulling it off, the only thing I could say from these two films back to back that doesn't pull it off, there's maybe a couple scenes in Alucarda that leaves a little bit to be desired as far as acting, which almost feels like soap opera / telenovela type of acting. But honestly, it kind of just fits the vibe. It didn't pull me out or anything. I feel like, to be honest, both of these films are really well cast and deliver what they need to deliver. When Alucarda is asking the two leads to scream uncontrollably for 75 minutes, man, do they do it.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. What do these movies promise? Like, if you haven't seen these films and we're going to say like, this is what you should expect from these movies. I think for me, Satanico Pandemonium delivers on like more of what you would think of from an exploitation film. Like, it has a lot of the different elements of like I think you summed it up perfectly a few minutes ago. Something where you turn the lights off, watch it by yourself, turn the volume down a little bit, even if you're alone, and enjoy the sleazy part of it, but also like a really well made, beautifully shot, constructed film from a highly seasoned filmmaker who was extremely technically competent. And Alucarda is a bit more of like a work of art, like a bit more of like a modern art piece, a bit more of like tied into the folklore and getting into more of like it's almost like it almost feels pagan at times to me a little bit with the way it's engaging with nature and the goat character. And it has like a little bit more of that focus. Still a lot of exploitation, but I don't think Alucarda is sensual almost ever. It's more, the sexuality in it is almost more tied into like this the not the possession. I keep wanting to say possession but it's not possession. It's just like it's just tied into the way they're like descending into Satan's grasps, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the integration of that into their lives as they
Yeah.
get closer and closer to each other. And honestly, I mean, you could almost look at it from that point of view. The intimacy is in kind of just the relationship, and
Yeah.
not like in a sexual relationship, but literally a bond.
Yeah.
As they literally made a pact to each other, and so that's where that intimacy happens. But yeah, you just mentioned the last thing that I wanted to bring up about the two is the main difference is to me when I look back on these is sort of the setting, because Alucarda is very natural nature, like trees, blades of grass in some of these settings, cave type feeling on some, and then Satanico is literally like inside the belly of a temple or like castle type grounds, essentially, while you're looking at it, and it gives a very different feeling for the two, but again, like two very complementary sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I don't know why I have this desire to like separate them a little bit. Like they're two different experiences, but 100% they're a great double feature. Like that's no doubt. They're a great double feature. And I think just because they're different enough, it gives you like something interesting to latch onto, right? For each one of those.
Yeah, anybody into film programming, you don't want to play like two identical movies or movies that have the same vibe or anything back to back, and these are quite different, even though we're listing that they're both in the nunsploitation genre and whatever. They I mean, different vibes altogether. Satanico is much quieter than Alucarda, and not just because of the screaming. It feels a little more humble, at least in how it's developed. The way that they approach it is through nature versus the inside of this temple is completely different, but it's definitely two films that will keep your attention if you're into this style of film or have never watched it. I think it's something that will be appealing to you to watch back to back. I think these are two really good entries into nunsploitation too.
I mean, I kind of agree. I think when most people think of nunsploitation, they probably think of what, like German films.
Yeah.
For the most part, I mean, there's a few from the UK, there's a few from Japan, although the nun movies from Japan go in a whole different direction. But
those nuns get cloistered.
Exactly. Maybe Italy has a bunch, but like it's European basically, right? But yeah, this is like it adds that extra layer of like Mexico culture and Catholicism, and that brand of Catholicism. So yeah, I agree.
Good. Next month we want to highlight the two films we're going to be covering. We're bringing back somebody that we both have shown some appreciation for in the past, but we got two titles from Mondo Macabro that are going to be exciting to discuss.
Yeah, I think for me, I talk a lot about my love for Japanese movies, and the other day on the Vinegar Syndrome Discord, we got into ranking countries by like the best films they've produced. And Japan for me was either second or third. I think it was second, or maybe it was even number one. Because I think the cool thing about Japan is that like you don't know about it as much if you're kind of getting into it. But no matter what genre of film you want to go down, they have an incredibly deep pool of rabbit holes you can go down in like any genre.
Yep.
And one of the genres that is really interesting in Japan has been this experimental, almost like industrial kind of punk, like or maybe even like steampunk kind of aesthetic. And the leader of that, or at least one of the more international names of that, is Shinya Tsukamoto. And obviously, a lot of people know him by Tetsuo the Iron Man, or at least have heard of that movie, even if he's not a household name. But Mondo has put out two of his movies, correct?
Yep.
So yeah, let's do those. I think the one that I had picked, which I would love to go over. It's just, I hate to say it's one of my favorite films from him because everyone's gonna think I'm a weirdo. But to be fair, like liking Tsukamoto already kind of put you in the weirdo camp to begin with. But
that is true.
Hiruko the Goblin is like one of the older Blu-rays from them.
And then the other one that they've got is Gemini, and these are films that don't get brought. I mean, Hiroku maybe is one that now gets brought up a little more when discussing Tsukamoto, but of course, everybody's talking about essentially one film with Tsukamoto, and we really want to dive into something else to not just belabor one filmmaker for one title, because that tends to happen often, and they have a full filmography that we really should give some attention to.
Come on, people.
So yeah, that'll be in January. We will get that recorded and out sometime in January, unless we have some sort of delay. But that is the plan at the moment. These were a really fun way to end the year. But other than that, we'd love to hear from you. What you're thinking about this. You can leave a review on iTunes, of course, or rating on Spotify. Any of the social media posts where Mondo Macabro posts these, or we post these under someone's favorite productions that there's a new episode up. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about the show. Anything that you'd like us to integrate, we can do our best to make that happen. When the new bundle comes out in January, Chris and I have talked about this. We may do 2 of those new titles for February. We just don't want to spoil them too much for people because we're all kind of getting in on that first wave, and so we want to give people time to watch them and get to know the new releases. But other than that, you got anything you want to share with everybody, Chris?
No, I mean, I want to add on to what you said. Like, we especially want to hear from people because there's a ton of y'all that listen to this. So, like, thank you, first of all. I'm constantly surprised. There's a ton of y'all that tune in and listen to this every time we put one out. So thank you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And like, I'd love to hear what you think, because the thing that always surprises me, and this is just more a reflection on my own insecurities than anything else, but like, I just expect the numbers to drop over time. And like, they don't really. Like, I like, people really tune in and seem to like this show. So I'd love to know like what you want to hear more about, if there's any ideas you have. Like, just to repeat what Ryan said, I mean, it's obvious that Mondo Macabro has a huge brand, so I'm extremely honored to be a part of this as like in kind of an official capacity with Jared and Pete and obviously you, Ryan. We're so intertwined at this point, but it's a nice way to reconvene with you once a month and be forced to talk for an hour or two. No, I just thank you. I mean, it's the end of the year, so I'm in a very contemplative mood to begin with, and I've got family over, so there's an undercurrent of being annoyed already because they're all busting in and making noise. But I'm just feeling very appreciative, and I want to love this community, but I don't know who you all are. So make yourselves known and let us love on you.
Yeah, we're loving what we're doing and can't wait to share more in the next year. We're looking to innovate some of those things in 2025 and keep delivering some of these retrospective titles because, again, Mondo Macabro has been around, as we showed tonight, for decades, literally.
Yeah.
And some of these releases have, for some people, been belabored to death, but for other people, they're just discovering them for the first time. And so if we can do a little bit of diving into some of these and inspire you to watch one either again or for the first time, that's all we can hope for. All right. For myself and Chris Haskell, thanks for your time. We'll see you again in January. Thanks to Pete and Jared, and enjoy taking a deep dive in the wild side of cinema.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ryan.
Hello! This is Matt.
And Emily from Scarecrow Video in Seattle, Washington. Did you know that we have the largest video collection in the world? We have over 146,000 titles and growing. That's over 3 times more than Netflix, Amazon, Max, and Hulu combined.
Plus, Scarecrow now offers rent-by-mail service throughout the U.S., so check out scarecrowvideo.org for details. You can catch Emily and I, or Matt and I, if that was going to be you saying that, on our bi-weekly YouTube show, Viva Physical Media, for video recommendations and so much more.
See ya!
Bye!
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description